Hello, everybody.
Welcome
back to dPod. It has been a long time. And so here today with me, I have Toph, Bia, and Hyuna. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
What up?
Hey, so we're recording this right now on December 2nd, 2023, which actually marks the 1 year mark of us producing the very first episode of dPod.
Awesome.
Yeah. So a year ago, we had recorded episode 1 right after our Christmas party where Toph was the Santa last year. And ironically, last night we had our Christmas party.
Yeah.
Again, where Santa was Toph again.
Yeah.
So, how was that Christmas party, by the way? I was sick yesterday, so I couldn't make it. I was sad.
I'm not sure. I was like leading stuff, so I'm not sure what the people's experience was, but I had a blast.
Yeah.
People loved the Black Santa
entrance
intro.
I saw I received a video from my wife where it was like stand back. Stand back. And then like Santa and Neil and Luke, his elves, were doing something as they were coming in.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was nice. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right, so to commemorate the 1 year mark, I guess, should we maybe share like what has been our favorite dPod episode from this past year? It's kind of grown into something that I didn't imagine it would be, actually. It's a lot. Yeah. But yeah, I think people have benefited from it and enjoyed it, especially our students here. And I know like people throughout our network too. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Oh, actually the Spotify Wrapped, Spotify does the rap thing. And it said that I have 80 top fans.
Wow.
Yeah, 80 people whose number one podcast they listen to is dPod.
No way.
Yeah.
I think people need to diversify their interests.
Yeah, that's probably all they listen to.
They know
Yeah, it's okay. That's probably one of them is probably my wife. So
And Eden.
Awesome.
any favorite episodes from this past year?
I think my favorite to record was definitely the dating one. That was hilarious. But one of my favorite ones is one of the more recent ones, Agenomics. Yeah, where you had Age on talking a little bit about their backgrounds, their perspectives, and it was kind of cool to see. I guess like kind of some marked changes in their self view and view of their relationships with each other and the church since they graduated. That was really cool to hear their thoughts on. And I kind of enjoyed like kind of getting into like their minds, seeing the way that they think and view the world. But also to see how God has like really shaped them in the past year and a half or so. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was a fun episode. They talked a lot. Ended up being a really long episode.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
My favorite ones are like the trip ones where people record like the little sound bits. I feel like it's like a photo, but not. And you kind of get to relive like different moments, especially for the ones where I was there. It was like the Atlanta one, different things like that. So I really like those.
Yeah, it's fun.
Confession, I'm really behind. dPod episodes.
Oh no, Bia.
I know.
Oh no.
I've like skipped around a lot.
It's okay. It's all right. It's not a requirement to be part of our team to listen to dPod.
Thank the Lord. I think my favorite was the dating episode. Seeing it from the brother's perspective, I was like, what? That was pretty funny. Yeah, and then I haven't caught up since then.
Nice. All right. Well, we need more dating episodes to get Bia on board here.
Yeah. I actually can't remember anything we talked about. Yeah. From the dating episode.
The sushi. And
I know. I kind of wonder how much content of substance there actually is. Or if it's just us roasting each other.
Yeah.
It's funny. All right. So today wanted to finally wrap up our basic series, which we started like months ago, but have never finished. And the last topic that we had planned that we had never done was about friendships or peers. Especially we use that word a lot in our church, like peers and peer classes and things like that. And maybe talk about some of the benefits to that. What is that all about? And how does that maybe contrast with some of our understanding of what friendships were supposed to be like before we came into college and things like that. And so I'll just open up with a kind of a general question. Like, what was your understanding of friendship prior to college? okay, coming into college, or I'm choosing college because for a lot of us that was the formative time where we became Christian, or that became a lot more serious for us. So what was your understanding of friendship prior to that?
I think for me, it was thinking back to like my high school days where I had a group of friends that I hung out with like basically all 4 years of high school. My understanding of my friendships was like that we were often in like the same like academic track. Like we were all AP kids. Some of them were like band kids. Some of them were like my neighbors that I knew since like elementary school, and we kind of grew up on the same street. But yeah, I kind of just saw them as like my study buddies, people that I knew, but I didn't really feel very like close, like deep with them. Like I could be like my real self. I kind of in high school I kind of like put on, depending on what friend group I was in, I had like a different like persona per like friend group. Yeah, like they were nice and like I liked them a lot, but I don't know, I didn't feel as like connected, if that makes sense, like with them, to a degree where like I like even now like I don't really talk to my high school friends. That's my own thing, but yeah, I don't know. There wasn't I've kind of felt like not as deep with my high school friends. We kind of connected on levels like academics and like common interests, which is fine. But nothing past that.
Just curious, like, so did that understanding of, because kind of the way you're describing it is like, oh yeah, there wasn't as deep of a connection, but was that a self-understanding you had already in high school?
I think in high school, well, I guess reflecting back on it, I can see that they weren't as deep as I would have liked them to be. But in high school, it just kind of felt like something was missing in our relationships. I'm not sure if I can put a finger on it, but I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just curious. Yeah. Because when I think back on my high school experience, I want to say that during that time, I felt like I had some pretty strong friendships, right? Like I had a group of maybe like 8 to 10 friends who, we hung out all the time together, and it really felt like we had like a common destiny, even because we went to such a hard high school, and we were just trying to just defeat this beast that is Troy High School. And and it felt like, I don't know, like I didn't know better, right? Like I think I agree with you that maybe like later on, when I look back on it, I can identify parts of that are sort of like, oh, okay, I could see why like I didn't experience the depth of relationships that I did later on. But yeah, so I was just curious. Yeah. I think part of it's also just the developmental thing, at least for guys. Like our brains aren't fully developed till we're 25 or whatever. So it's just sort of like I'm just barely like functioning through life as like a 14-year-old. So yeah. Maybe that's part of the reason. But yeah, how about others? Yeah, your understanding of friendship prior to college.
I think for me, I just wanted to have fun. So I think I like picked my friends based on how much fun you could have in like conversations and different things like that. Or like I wanted to befriend people that were like cool or had some kind of like social capital. Yeah. But I think mostly it was just for fun. Like, oh, I want to talk about fun things. Like, I don't know. I was into K-pop back then. So we would talk about that or like just boys. Yes. But yeah, did things like that,
I was going to ask you like what counts as fun and then what would count as not fun. And so then you would reject that person or you wouldn't pursue that person as a friend.
I think fun is like similar interests. So then like K-pop, K-dramas, boys. But then not fun would be people who are just kind of nice, We would not have been friends. Well, like, sorry.
But in your initial list, there was nothing about mean. Yeah.
Okay, wait. Well, nice, by nice, I mean like, some people just seem like they don't really have strong feelings or interests in anything else. And they're just kind of there, which... Every person is an eternal soul and they're important. I know that now, but I didn't know that before. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. Oh, cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I think similarly, my view of friendship was, people with similar interests or sometimes like shared experiences. Like, for example, my really close group of friends in high school, there were about maybe like 10 to 15 of us. But I think what initially drew us together was we were all kind of like not able to fit into like the two main like popular crowds. So there's like just the cool popular kids and there's the athletes. We were neither of those. So I think we kind of just like coalesced at a certain point, like just because of that. But over time, I think, I really grew to like really love those guys. Like I really feel like I was part of like a tribe. We literally did everything together. I think we also like laughed and were really loud about like everything. And we over time, I think we actually like developed shared interest in like, whether it was like TV shows or like same kinds of music, played a lot of like video games and stuff like that. So I actually have like fond memories of like conversations with them and just like sharing a lot of laughs. But I think it initially was because of like the shared experience of like, oh, we're like kind of left out kids. And that kind of drew us together. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, kind of your description of how, like, maybe your friend group became the people that you ended up sort of hanging out with, right? It wasn't maybe sometimes it's not so intentional.
Yeah.
And I think that reflects my experience too. Like when I think about high school, like I said, I had like 8 to 10 friends who, we hung out a lot. But I think it just ended up being because we were in similar classes. We had similar kind of, I guess, career and future interests. So then just natural personality wise, I guess we just end up coalescing with certain kinds of people. And so then I think I don't think I would have known this when I was in high school, but when I look back on it now, my understanding of friendship was just that it was just people who I liked enough that I would spend most of my time with them and that we would mutually benefit each other in some way, right? Because I think a lot of us, like, we helped each other through school. Like, I was better at math, my friend was better at history, like whatever it is, right? And we would help each other, and there would be just a sense of, like I said, like I don't think it was, even when I look back on it now, I don't think it's negative. I think it's sort of like, no, that's good. Like we needed that at the time.
Yeah.
But when I then think back on it, the basis of our relationships were basically like school. Like school was the common enemy, and actually a lot of those friends happened to come to Berkeley with me.
Oh no!
And so I had a pretty strong group of high school friends at UC Berkeley when I started, and maybe we can talk about this later. But I think that impacted my ability to get close with church friends as well, because I had such a strong group of friends already that I was getting a lot of benefit from, and we enjoyed hanging out with each other and things like that. And so anyways, like I think that's a little bit of how I viewed friendship prior to college. So now let's shift into kind of as we became Christian, and as so for I think a lot of us that was in college, like how did your view of friendships change? What were some new ideas that kind of came in, especially as you reflected on Christian relationships, like Christian friendships, and what that should look like?
I think for me, something that changed is just the idea that like before, because I think before I said like I picked my friends. Oh, I like you, you're going to be my friend. But then in like Christian relationships, I realized that's not the case, because you're almost like given these people, and God says, here, you are a people, you are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, like you are my church. Like I think that was something that was very new to me, and I think something that I had to grapple a lot with was like, oh, but like what if I don't like them, or like what if I don't naturally get along with them? And I had to work on making my personal relationship with God, my commitment to God, a part of my relationship with other people as well. So I think that's how it kind of changed.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think one thing that was weirdly interesting about the way my close high school friends formed and my Christian relationships formed was that they were similar in that we didn't necessarily like intentionally like pick each other out. Like I mentioned with my high school buddies, we just ended up being like, oh, we're this identity of people, so we like coalesce together. And in a similar way, like with my Christian friends, like Hyuna was saying, like God says like, hey, you're a holy priesthood, like you're something you're not. And then all of a sudden, like, yeah, that's who we are. But I think one way that it was different was that, like my peers in college, we were like super different. Like, I'm not sure if you remember Hyuna. Like,
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, Hyuna and I went to UCLA together. And my peer class was like 5 of us. It was me, African kid born in Detroit, just moved to LA for college. My peer Godwin, who was from South India, son of wealthy family. My friend Brian, Chinese American from San Jose, and my friend Justin Jackson from Riverside, African American, and Josh Blum, who was half white, half Hispanic, but internally we loved Indian people. So it was like a variety. It was
really wow.
Yeah, it was like a crazy like hodgepodge of us. And initially, like it was like, oh yeah, we really didn't have like a whole lot in common. When we got together, but one thing that was like different about that is that because like my high school friends, even though we didn't initially intentionally form, we had a lot of like similar interests we discovered, but our group wasn't necessarily the case. But I think with Christian relationships, like Hyuna was saying, where God calls you a people, it's almost like, oh hey, he called you something that you're not yet, and then you kind of have to like strive to like live into that identity as like a forward group of people who can like, love each other, serve each other. So I guess there's a sense of like obligational duty that the Bible like prescribed that caused that to form. Whereas with my high school friends, there isn't like an external obligation necessarily.
Yeah. Because even if like you don't, you go to like a small high school or something and you don't get to like choose your high school friends. I mean, you could always choose to, steel your heart against them. You can always choose to like push them out of your life if you really wanted to, right? But I think what maybe Hyuna's referring to is a part of the fact that, like, and kind of Tofu, you were saying, like, there's all these commands that tell us that we have to love one another, right? Like, despite our differences, and I always think about like how in Mark chapter 3, like Jesus redefined family, right? And he said, like, who are my mother, my brother, and my sisters? It's those who do the will of God, right? And so, like, fellow Christians, like that's why we call each other like brother and sister in Christ, right? Like, I mean, that's not just like a nice label, right? Like that was one of these things in the early church where when they started doing this, people were scandalized because they thought like everyone was having like incestuous relationships or something because they'd like call their like spouse the sister in Christ, right? It's like, what the world, right? Like, no, because they meant it. Like, no, we're family now, right? And if you're family, like, of course, there's lots of brokenness in family nowadays, but family means that you can't like you're not getting rid of that person. Like that person's your sister, that person's your brother, right? And so then learning to relate within the bounds set by God, saying, okay, here's a church, here are your brothers and sisters, love these people, right? And in some ways that, God gives you your friends, and you're like, thank God.
Why that person?
Yeah. Any other thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think like what you just said, like the aspect of like your friends being like part of like your spiritual family. I think that was something that was really radical for me. Like seeing my peers as like, these are my sisters in Christ, these are my brothers in Christ, and like you said, like if I like cut them off, like when you cut off family, that relationally really hurts. And yeah, I mean, I had like some friends that like end up leaving our church or just leaving the faith, and it felt like painful to experience that, even if we weren't like super 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 close and things had in common, but it was more so like, oh, but that's my brother and sister in Christ, and they're no longer here. Yeah, but I think getting to like revolutionize friendships to be like family, like that brought me a lot of comfort and a lot of sense of like security that like, oh, these people are not, they can't leave me. It's going to hurt if they do leave me, but like I have this feeling of this sense of like, oh, but they're also with me for like the long haul. Like we're going to do life together. And we're going to serve God together. And that like really like ennobled like my friendships and ennobled my just, the way that I related and saw people at church. So I thought it's pretty cool. Just this picture of family. Like it doesn't have to just be with my blood relatives, but it's also in like the body of Christ. So that was really cool for me.
Yeah. And I think for me, something else that comes to mind as I think about how this shifted for me is that, well, like my high school friends, like I love them and everything. When I think about what the purpose of the friendship was, it was like fun. It was getting through like school. It was helping each other. then like just being bros, and just like doing the dumb stuff and playing video games and like and hearing each other out about girl drama and just being like, hey man, just being each other's cheerleader, like you're awesome, like don't worry, right? And then but then as I became a Christian in college and as that identity became more important to me, I started to realize that a large function of Christian friendship is supposed to be helping you grow and mature in Christ, right? Helping you endure and be faithful and there were elements of that I couldn't get from my non-Christian friends, right? Like because they wouldn't share the same worldview as me, right? Like let's just say, for example, like getting prayer for some struggle with sin or something like that, right? And getting encouragement and having people in the church be able to speak the gospel into you and say, hey, you remember God still loves you. Hey, endure, like I can't get that from my non-Christian friends, right?
Yeah.
Because some of my non-Christian friends would be like, hey, what's wrong with that, man? They just keep doing it, I mean, like, oh, okay, like I don't think this is working, right? So like just from a very practical perspective, like, oh no, there's certain things that I can only get from someone who understands this grand shift in worldview that I just had, right? As I became a Christian, right? And without those relationships, it's gonna be hard for me to really stay faithful and obedient for the long haul in this Christian life. And so that's just one additional perspective too.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, it kind of relates to like the idea like God calls you something that you're not yet, and like so there's like an overarching like new purpose of the relationship, like you said, like where. With my high school friends, similarly, it was like, yeah, we just wanted to like have fun, shoot the breeze, but with my Christian friends, like, yeah, God calls you a people, but then also he's called you to try to become more like Jesus. So that's one way that experientially was different. It was like, we were with my high school friends. We were kind of like okay with like the status quo, like not necessarily trying to like make us become people we weren't already. With my Christian friends, like to some degree, yeah, we do this similar things, like, shoot the breeze, hang out like over time. But I think generally we were always trying to see how's like God's word like speaking to us, and how can we grow to be more of like a people who can care for each other, bear each other's burdens. And I think like with my high school friends, I love them. I still miss a lot of those guys, but that's not something we would have become or done together.
All right, so we're talking a little bit right now about how our view on friendship changed, but how did you actually start getting close to your friends at church? Okay, so what did that look like? What, like, everything from what motivated you to do that, because I'm sure there were some difficulties along the way, to like what were some of the practical things that you did?
Yeah, I think speaking to the motivation aspect, I think to some degree, like I took a lot of my cues from the like testimonials of people who'd come before me in my Christian walk, so a lot of my mentors. And when I first had a chance to see like their own peer relationships, because a lot of them were out of college for like 3-4 years, it was crazy to me to see that people could be friends for like that long after college, where typically like the pursuit of some kind of like career or like other like life goal would generally like separate people to move to different states and cities. But these people were like generally like still together post college. And that was really like inspiring me, like, oh wow, like relationships can actually be this way. Like that was a big surprise, because I didn't really know a world of like not looking after like your own self-interest, even for Christians. So I think that was an initial motivation, like, oh wow, this is something really beautiful that I could also have. And like God's given me a band of brothers I could try to strive to have that with. Yeah.
Who were some of those people that you were observing?
It was my leaders in LA. So like Kevin Ding, Tim Choi, Calvin and Esther.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Daniel Eugene, Dan and Hannah. So when we first had chances to go to Berkeley for like the larger retreats, and I'd see them interacting with like their old friends, I was like, oh wow, this is like what they left to come to LA, and these are like their close people that they've had for the last 7-10 years. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And it was neat to be able to take students this past year, our Chicago students, to like a spring break trip to California, for example. And I think they had that experience too, of like they're meeting all these people and they're like, well, you've known these since when? And like, that experience of like, wow, you've had like these relationships for a long time. And it's pretty special. Like it does bring me back to how I did think that was pretty neat when I first came to our church too. Kind of these like older guys who'd known these other friends for like 10 plus years. And you're like, oh, haven't heard of that too much in my life. So yeah, it's neat.
Yep.
Yeah. How about others?
I think for me, like motivation to grow in Christian relationships came from like sheer obedience to God initially, because like I said before, it was like there are certain people that I just didn't like hanging around, and I was so used to kind of cutting them off or like cold shouldering them, pushing them away. But like I was kind of doing that at the beginning of my first year of college when I started going to church, and like that friend confronted me basically saying, hey, like, you know, I am Christian, you are Christian, and we're called to like love each other. Can we do that? Like, can we talk about why we're feeling like this towards each other? And I think that really kickstarted like me viewing friendships within the church differently. If I am called to like love this one friend that I don't like because we are both Christian sisters, like that should apply to all the other Christian sisters that I see at church. So yeah, I think that was like the initial motivation. And I think something that really helped me grow, just beyond like sheer obligation, in my relationships is just, there are a lot of things. I think one thing is just, confessing sins to each other, not just, you know, talking about how my day was or something that's frustrating for me, but like actual sin. And I remember like calling my friend after having confessed, like a sin that I thought I would take to my grave to like my leader. I talked to her, and I think I just experienced a lot of like freedom and also, like strength, because like she prayed for me. And I think like, yeah, that's like a really big way that I grew in my friendships, like knowing that, okay, I'm fully seen and I'm still accepted and they're still committed to me. And it wasn't just one-sided, you know, like it's not just me, it's like confessing all of my sins, but then by me being open and receiving prayer and strength, like I think that enabled like other people to be more open to. And I think we just had this mutual like understanding that, okay, we're all sinners and we all need God's grace and we can like help each other. So I think that's another like big way that we grew in our relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your friend who just directly confronted you, like, that's pretty awesome. Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
No, yeah, she's...
kudos to her.
Yes, she's... I'm very thankful for her, because I think she's very relentless in making sure that our friendship is, like, there, you know, whereas like kind of fading away and different things like that. So I think I really appreciate that.
Yeah, beyond just going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
For it to be a substantive relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's such a blessing when you have someone who will insist on that, right? And when you were sharing, I mean, just to pull in some Bible into this, you know, just the point about confession reminded me, like, that's why, like in James 5:16, we're commanded to confess, right? Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. And, you know, like confession is ultimately before God, of course, right? And yet we get this encouragement to confess to one another because, and I've experienced this, right? Where your friend or your leader, like they become sort of a proxy for God, right? When you can't believe that God actually forgives you.
Yeah.
When your friend hears what you just did or you know what you just confessed and they still accept you, right? They put their arms around you and they pray for you. You experience because we're like fleshly beings, right? And so in the flesh we experience somebody like, you know, we don't have Jesus in the flesh anymore. So maybe the second best thing is our friend in the flesh, right? To actually pray that for you, right? And it becomes that much more real. So
I meant to that.
Yeah, and I was also just thinking about like just you know, along similar lines, I guess, you know, we recently did the DT through Hebrews, right? And I was thinking about Hebrews 3, where it says, exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And I guess the verse before that says, take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart leading you to fall away from the living God. And so, yeah, just the exhortation in scriptures, again, to be in each other's lives every day, to exhort, right? Because we're so prone to falling away. Like that's the kind of thing that only a Christian friend can do, right? Like the sort of saying, like your non-Christian friend's not going to do that. Right? Although they might, you know, you might have a lot of other redeeming qualities in that relationship, but
for me, I think one of the biggest motivators when I became Christian was seeing older sisters, like how they like loved one another and were friends. My class was reached out to by the class of 2017. I think seeing how they were like crazy with one another, but then how they also like really loved and poured into my class, teaching us like going through course 101 with different one of us, like Jeanette and like the Sally and Sarah, and I did like DT with some of the older sisters. And yeah, I think getting to see how their relationships were so close. And then when I tell them this, they're like, you have no idea. We were not that close when we were juniors reaching out to me as a freshman. But I saw the genuineness of their relationships, and I really wanted to emulate that with my friends. And yeah, like the way that they loved one another and like loved us as the younger ones, like I really wanted to be like them. I looked up to them a lot as like spiritual like mentors in that way. So that really challenged me to grow deeper in my friendships. And then also practically, like they lived together. So I was like, I should probably live with my friends. And by doing that, I think it kind of marrying off what Toph was saying, I got to really see myself more clearly as I related with my friends. And like Hyuna's friends, I had a lot of friends, Jeanette, who would confront me in good ways and help me to like see myself because we were just so different. And so those moments of receiving feedback from one another and like trying to understand one another, and then again praying for one another and confessing what's going on either with each other or within like our own like hearts, what's happening, like that really deepened my Christian friendships, like seeing it first emulated out in older ones and then trying to do that in my own friendships and doing what they did. I think that really grew us closer, having an example to kind of live towards.
So how did you even start to observe that about the older sisters? Like, were you in their home or like, because I'm assuming you can't get that from just sitting in the pews together on Sunday morning, right? Like, so tell me a little bit about how you personally observed these kinds of things that motivated you later on.
Yeah, I mean, I just loafed around in their living room a lot. I just kind of like invited myself over. They would have me over for meals, and I just observed how they lived, just in their natural habitat, the way that they bantered with one another, the way that they wanted to do DT with like crazy freshmen like us. And I just watched them and saw how they related with one another. And I compared it to my then like relationships outside of the church that I had. I was in a sorority my freshman year, and I was like, oh, this sisterhood versus like the sisterhood that I see at church is very different. And I was like, why is that? And that got me more curious to seek more about like, okay, whatever they have, I want that. Not just in my friendships, but just in like also my walk with God personally. So I just watched their lives.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like it. So I just want to draw that out because I think your answer like presupposes that people are observing each other's lives, right? And and I think that's why at our church, we talk about open homes a lot, and like the students are always welcome at any of our places. I guess if you live at UPC, the UPC people, it's a little harder to access your places because
you can still come.
Yeah, UPC is like a fortress, but
full access to all our
hey,
apartments.
what are your guys' apartment numbers? Do you want to
720 South?
All right,
901 South.
901 South.
If you come often enough, the front desk people will recognize you and they'll just let you in.
Actually, that happens to me when I go, especially on Friday morning. The lady that's there, she just says, "Okay, walk in." Genji's place, right? Oh yeah, I'm going to Genji's place. So just a kind of open home culture where we want people to see our lives, right? Because like Paul says to imitate me as I imitate Christ, but like how can you imitate people that you don't see, right? And you're not supposed to imitate like just what you see on Sunday morning, because obviously we're on our best behavior on Sunday morning, right? So you want to, I guess you do want to imitate our best behavior though.
Yeah.
So anyways, don't get complicated about that. So and then our upperclassmen too, right? Like it's neat that some of our upperclassmen, they have homes and apartments that I know they've been inviting some of the students to and things like that. And so I really hope that becomes more and more of our culture here at the University of Chicago, Illinois Tech Ministries. All right. So
I had one more thing to say too on like the getting close together. So I think one way that happened for my peers and I when we were in college was living together, actually. So kind of like what Bia was mentioning with seeing the older girls living together. And one verse that I think motivated us to do that was Hebrews 10:24-25. Let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And after we had also observed a lot of our leaders from college and how they took that step to live together and what that did for their relationships, we wanted to also emulate that too. And personally, I actually wasn't really opposed to the idea of living with my peers. And part of that was because in high school, I was in boarding school for the last 2 years. And my closest friends from high school are probably like from that period of boarding school. Yeah, we weren't like Christian or anything, but because we lived together for 2 years, working hard to try to like beat the IB program, we just grew a lot closer as we were doing life and stuff together. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that was like super formative for me actually, coming into college. And I was thinking, wow, like how much more could that be if I'm doing with like Christian brothers who are trying to be more like Jesus together. So we did that our senior year. I wish we did it earlier, but senior year was the time we were able to actually do it. And that was really a lot of fun. We got to host a lot of younger classmen at our place, do DTs together, learn how to cook together and things like that. And that was really awesome and formative for us. Yeah. And it was challenging too, because, since we're living together, we see like the best and worst of each other. So we'd have to like work through all that too. Yeah. But I really like cherish those times living together with a group of guys.
Yeah, and I think living together with a fellow Christian, that's become something that's been really formative for a lot of us. And there's nothing about, for example, the Hebrews 10 verse that says there's no verses that say you have to live together. Right? Yeah. So that's not something we can ever directly say like, oh, this is, you have to do this. But it's sort of like, well, what's the best way to place yourself in a situation where you can stir up one another to love and good deeds every day and exhort one another every day and to have that, because we always talk about, well, it'd be nice to do that, but how do you have the information, or how do you have the data points to actually be able to bear one another's burdens every day, right? So I mean that's one practical reality. And here's the other thing about living together. I really. So, okay, I'm going to go off on U Chicago again right now. So, while every other school in the nation is, converting their singles into doubles and doubles into triples and triples into quads so that they can get more students to go into their dorms, U Chicago still has this really strong culture of having single dorms. And it's something that is like mind-boggling to me, because I think it's, first of all, terrible for the, mental health kind of anxiety, kind of epidemic that we have. But it's also like from a Christian perspective, I think it's something that people need to like seriously think about. Like, do I really want to be in a situation where I have a single room, like a single dorm that I'm in? And I know what I'm going to say is slightly edgy here, but I felt very validated when I was reading Fuel in the Flame. I think it's in Fuel in the Flame. Where in one of the chapters, I think it's like Steve Shadrach, I can't remember exactly what he says, but it was something like, they're either being like really selfish or they're being shady and they want to hide something. And of course, there might be other reasons, of course, right? Like, and I think the reason that University of Chicago gives is like, oh, we want you to be able to have a place where you can really engage your intellect without being like interrupted, right? But I'm like, I don't know if like your intellect not being interrupted is so important that you put yourself in a situation where it's going to be a lot easier to sin and be selfish, right? So anyways, it's just something to think about, right? Like I'm not saying that if you're a Christian you can't be in a single, like, of course, and I'm not saying that, right? But for someone who wants to really take Christian discipleship and Christian life seriously, and who wants to grow in their relationship with their friends as well, like a good option would be to live in a situation where people have access into your life, right? Right. And so I love how so many of our students in our church, even at the University of Chicago, have been, getting apartments together, so where at least they can share that kind of space. Even if like the university doesn't allow you to like have like doubles or something, like, or triple rooms, like at least like, if you're in an apartment or you're in a kind of larger living situation where you have people that you're going to see all the time, right? Then you're going to be able to you're going to be sort of forced to grow in many more areas of Christian discipleship. Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. And it's fun. I think I think I personally thought it was worth the cost of like letting go of my own like comfort or like being able to, I don't know, play loud music in my room or sleep whenever I want, have the lights on as late as I want. Like, I think it's worth it for sure. It's fun, and it's like the deep bond that you can form with people that you are in the same room with. I think it's hard to come by. So
Yeah, this is random, but the most intense period where I think I grew the most was actually when I lived in Dana House. So Dana House is we've talked about it before, but it's a house of like 25 guys in Berkeley. And I actually lived there with all of my staff and all of my students.
wow.
So I was one of the house managers, but I was ministering to class of 2016 at the time who were seniors. And so seniors lived at Dana House too. So there were like 6 guys in my small group, and they all lived at the house. And my 3 staff all lived at the house too.
Wow.
So and this was before I was married, right? So like,
Dang.
so my entire life was in that house.
Crazy.
And it was good for all of us because, like I'd be like, oh man, I don't want to get up for DT. But I'm like, but these guys live with me. I'm like, okay, we're doing 7 a.m. DT together. And so I get up, I'm like, and then these guys are not up. So I'm like, I go to their room number 5, knock on their door. Hey, it's time for DT.
Wow.
Next door. Hey, it's time for DT. Come downstairs. You don't even have to go anywhere. We're just meeting downstairs, guys. Come on.
That's so funny.
Just roll out of bed and come downstairs.
Wow.
So I don't know. We have good memories from that time and painful memories from that time. I'm sure mutually. So. But what I can say for sure, it was a time of tremendous growth for all of us. We had to take our Christian life seriously. So
I didn't know that. That's crazy. Like people get ministering.
I don't know if anyone else in our church has ever been in that situation.
Yeah.
Actually. That was a very unique period that lasted for about, I think it was like only like 7 months or so, but because it was right before I got married. Yeah. It's crazy. All right. So since we're on the topic of living with your friends, maybe do just a couple of you want to talk about what is it about that caused you guys to grow a lot in your friend relationships, Christian friend relationships?
I think one aspect that Toph touched on earlier is like, because we lived together and we wanted to do ministry together, we had a lot of the younger ones over a lot. And I think we got to practice like in practicality, like what it means to like minister to somebody. It grew us a lot to be more responsible, to clean our house every week, to learn how to cook and bring people over and like try to be hospitable. I don't think that would have really happened if it was just us on our own. We kind of get used to one another's and like the grime and stuff. But because we were like, okay, the freshmen are coming over in 20 minutes. We have to cook, or we need to clean the bathroom and different things like that. Like it matured us in just life skills, doing ministry together, like as like a housemates. And we also live right next door to like Elaine and her housemates. And so often we would like have one another over for like dinners, or like invite a bunch of freshmen over and then split, and go to different houses and come together. And it was a lot of fun. I felt like it was like we got to really do ministry together, like hands-on, and that matured us in many different ways. So I think that aspect of living together like allowed us to grow in just like our ministry muscles.
So I know we've been talking a lot about kind of living together, but so that's obviously not the only way to grow close with your church friends. So could you guys speak into like what are some other ways in which you grew in your relationship with Christian friends and peers throughout your college years, outside of like the living together aspect of it?
I think one way that happened for me was our leaders at the time tried to have us be involved with like planning and putting on different types of evangelistic events and things like that for our friends. So like my junior year, we did this thing called More Than a Feeling, where I shared like my testimony, and one of my friends did a gospel presentation, and then all my peers, we set up these different booths to kind of like answer different apologetic related questions about Christianity. And we all just brought our friends to that. And that was pretty cool. And I think what that did in terms of getting us closer was like working together on like this shared goal of sharing the most precious thing we've received with our friends who we obviously loved and cared for at the time too. I think that's one way that we got close. And in the course of like working that out, there's like, dry runs, there's like pushing back on ideas. There's like, oh, like I want to give this talk. Why does he get to give it and not me? And then you have to work out like, oh, like
healthy competitiveness.
Yeah. And they kind of have to work out like, oh, what's going on there? Like why is that such a big deal? So like different things like that where I think we wouldn't have been able to have those types of conversations unless we were in the context of trying to get out of ourselves and minister to other people. So that was really cool, I think, like getting the chance to do like little things like that. I think that's one way that we got a lot closer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is not a spiritual answer, but definitely just spending time with each other helps. Yeah. I mean, because I think it's just a priority thing, right? Like you're going to feel close to the people that you actually make time for. And I think as my Christian discipleship grew throughout college, I think the time I spent with my friends, like my high school friends versus my church friends, started to shift. And then my time with my high school friends became a little more focused. Like it was times where I really wanted to connect with them, and then maybe I wanted to invite them to some church things. Maybe I wanted to just share about what was going on in my life with regards to my faith. So I think my times with my church friends became more intentional. And then the people that I had more just like kind of downtime with and kind of just default hanging out time with shifted more towards my church friends as they became my default sphere or my kind of default group of friends that I would go to. And so, in a way that felt weird at first, right? Because it felt like, oh, am I like rejecting my old friends? Like it's, but I don't think it was. Like, I don't think it really was that. I think it was me changing. It was my identity shifting. Yeah. My identity becoming, because it used to be more like, my identity was that I was a good student versus now my identity is that I'm a Christ follower. And I think I was just going through the commensurate changes in my relational world as a result of that. So So I guess my short answer is just a lot more hanging out with them. Yeah.
I think also another thing was like trying to be there for each other in, I guess, more like unfortunate incidents in one another's lives. So like if someone had like a family member who was sick or someone who like passed away, we would all try to like get together to like either pray for our friend or if possible, like try to go to attend said event or thing to kind of show that, like not only do we like try to do Christian life together, but even in like the messy and like unfortunate aspects of life where they're trying to like build each other up and bear each other's burdens in a sense too. So we would try to do things like, either treat our friend, like put some cash together and say, hey, like treat your family to this meal while you're with them, or asking just how we could pray for them while they were back with their family. And whether it was not like people passing, some people just had like tough family situations too, or it was just hard to be at home. And so in those cases, we can't like be physically there, but we try to do things to either like stay in touch over breaks or pray for them while they were at their families' places. So I think that was one thing that also like deepened our bonds a bit too. Like, cause we're, complex people. We live fragmented lives, and how our family relationships are kind of seeps into everything else. So that was one way where we tried to like get close, and I think really helped a lot actually, as we helped each other work through those things.
Yeah. And and then the kind of, there's obvious things like things that people mentioned already in stories, right? Like the bearing each other's burdens through like confession, praying for each other, that aspect. I think there's like serving together, like Toph mentioned, but also like higher impact things like going on mission trips or like these like really formative events, but then there's a friend or two alongside you that goes alongside that with you, and then suddenly you view that friend differently, right? And so it's a very personal thing between you and God, but also there's this friend alongside you, right? And then, but it's not those high impact things as well, it's the daily things, right? Like so when I think about my friendships from college that I really appreciate, they were the guys who I met with like multiple times a week to do devotion with, right? And like I don't think I can point to any particular devotion time as like life changing and like, oh my gosh, like now I want to be a pastor or something. It wasn't like that. It was just like, but I needed people to do that with, right? To like do the kind of the daily grind of Christian life with, right? And when you look back, you're like, wow, like that friend was faithful to me all these years, right? And we did that together, right? So as you guys think about your relational world, like, so there's like these formative relationships, right? There's like your leaders, right? There's people that you're discipling, and then there's your friends, right? Like our peers, right? Like how has your relationship with your peers shaped you in a unique way? I think this is probably different person to person, but how has your peer relationships shaped you versus like, the other types of relationships?
I think one way, I guess one thought that comes to mind when there's two things, but one thing is just the fact that like my peers shaped me in like the little areas of my life that other people wouldn't see. And I think this kind of goes back to like living together with peers. I didn't live with my leaders. I mean, none of my mentors came knocking on my door because I didn't come to DT. But like when I lived with my friends, they saw like how I talk to my parents, how I spend my time, what I spend my money on, like how many clothes I'm getting versus how much I'm like using my money to treat other people, different things like that. And I think like, yeah, my peers kind of called me out on different things like that my leaders wouldn't necessarily have been able to see. So I think that's one way that's different. And like another thing is just the fact that like my peer relationships in some ways strengthened me in ways that other relationships couldn't. Cause like, when we're like going through figuring out how to be a Christian as a college student, or like figuring out how to love our family for the first time as Christians, different things like that. Like there's a sense that we're going through something together. We're experiencing something at the same time and the same stage. And I think the strength that comes from just knowing that someone is going through the same thing as me and we're struggling together and we're striving to imitate Christ together, like that strength is very different from like the strength that comes from like a mentor saying, hey, I've been there, I did this is maybe helpful, or like you can have hope because I was in your shoes before, but now look where I am now, like whatever. Or like it's different from like how the younger ones can motivate you to like push yourself and keep running the race. So I think like basically just by them being there and experiencing the same thing, I think that has been very strengthening. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I think one way, interestingly, when I think about it, that it shaped me is in the aspect of like vision casting. Because we're kind of going through the same like periods of life together. We're kind of foreseeing that, as we want to continue to grow and serve Jesus together, we want to continue to take big steps of faith. And one thing that was cool was like, my peers had like a big reunion this past July where all like 40 something of us across the country came together in Chicago. And a lot of it was just like, having fun, catching up, exploring the city. But at the end of it, we did this cool activity where we cast like a 4-year vision for ourselves, and we got into a circle and read that out. And I think that was really neat. 'Cause in a sense, like, we've kind of been like pushing on our own in our separate cities to try to continue to grow and serve God together. But getting together at that point was really neat because we're sharing about here's where we're at, but here's where we want to continue to grow. And I think that was really cool. It feels different like when you're hearing that from someone who's like in the same period of life as you, and really challenging to say, this is one way that they want to serve God. Like they want to do like foreign missions or something, and they're willing to like, drop their job and uproot their lives and go to anywhere in the world where God is calling them to. Yeah. And if they get the chance to in 4 years, like they're going to do it. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's like so awesome. Like, and if I felt like, I wasn't necessarily there yet, that's like something like pushing me. What would it take for me to like be willing to do something like that? So in a sense, it feels like a different kind of motivation because it's like, this person who's also going through similar life stage and roughly like similar experiences and circumstances is trying to grow in their relationship and devotion in this way. And I think that's like been really cool for me too, and how I think my peer relationships have shaped me in terms of like vision casting and what my life could look like down the line.
Yeah, I think for me, one just specific ways in which my peers have shaped me is that they keep me real in the sense that none of them are impressed by me. Right. So like, I guess like to the students here, like at Chicago or whatever, I'm like, oh, DP is like the preacher, like, it's past the pastor and whatever. But like, when like our friends get together, it's sort of, DP is just DP, he's just one of the dudes. So, it's kind of nice actually to have a context in which like we all kind of remember what we were like in college, and and we marvel at the fact that we are where we are now, and so many of our friends, like still serving faithfully and things like that. And it's like, wow, that's really neat. But we're not like impressed by each other anymore. I think it's just sort of like we're glad to be friends, and just come together to have some strengthening time and be known for who you are. So that's it's not a shaping in the sense that like it's like pushing me forward in some way. But I think that there's a reality of like who we are that like I think I stay grounded because of my peers in some ways. So for the sake of time, we're going to move on to our last question here. Okay, so our last question is, it's a double question. Okay, but you have to just do it succinctly. Okay. So what is a regret that you have with regards to peer relationships? Okay, what is a regret that you have as you think back on however many years you've been at our church? But then paired with that, what is your vision and hope for your friendships as you look 10 years from now?
10 years.
Okay, 10 years from now. How old will you guys be 10 years from now?
36.
36? In your late 30s.
Oh, wow.
And I'll be in my early 40s.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
So what is a regret and a vision and hope?
I think my regrets were missed opportunities to be vulnerable and confess my sins, and missed opportunities to be there to comfort someone. Kind of letting like petty squabbles get in the way of like actually showing love and compassion. I think that's one of my regrets from college, like not doing that with my peers, some of which are in different churches now. So
yeah.
But I think one vision that I have is that, like I'll be able to continue to grow in that, like leaning into situations where I need to like confess and be vulnerable, and not letting like those petty squabbles get in the way, and that can create a richness in our relationships that I want to be there, even though they're not necessarily at that spot right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
I think for me, I regret like not reaching out to peers I didn't naturally click with or like didn't live with. I have a humongous peer class. And now that, we're all in different ministries and live in different places, I'm like, wow, I wish I would have gotten to know her better when I was in college and we were like in like the same area all the time. I think one vision I have is like now that we are so spread apart that when we're together, like we can quickly like bond over and just be vulnerable, like Tova was saying, like quickly, and just open up about things that are going on and the things that we worried about in our ministry, so that like it doesn't have to stagnate at college, but it can just continually grow as we're growing as like people and like Christians. That our relationships can only just get better as we try to like invest in them wherever we left off.
I think one regret that I have with my peers is not like striving for unity when it came to ministering to younger ones. I think I had this like savior complex and I felt like I could do it by myself a lot of times. And yeah, I think that led to sometimes like resentment or bitterness. But yeah, I think I wish I did that more. And and one vision that I have is that 10 years from now, we would still be bonded together by our commitment to God and by our commitment to the mission. Because I know that in 10 years, we're not going to be in the same place and maybe not even have similar experiences in terms of what kind of ministry we're in. But I hope that we would all still be going strong and trusting God and, being committed to, His Great Commission.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to a regret, and this is sort of just a practical one, but I think, and I don't know if it's something I could have changed actually, but because I had various like family obligations or just different things, like there were a lot of opportunities to hang out with peers or to peers will do these trips, peer trips and things like that, and I missed a lot of them actually. Missed a lot of my peer trips, and there were circumstances around that maybe I couldn't change, but that is a regret that I have, and I feel like because of that, I feel poorer as a result, right? And a little bit of FOMO, right, with regards to that. But so then, but I think it's good to acknowledge that, because then it's like, oh no, see, it's because it's a really good thing to be able to invest into those relationships. And, you know, like the fact that I missed part of it, like, you know, I just have to live with that. But I think my vision and hope kind of is, I guess, tied to that because recently a couple of my peers, they started this peer trips workspace actually. And we have this cool idea to try to have a big peer trip every 2 years. And whoever can make it. Right. And it's kind of funny because they mapped it out like every 2 years until we're 70.
Wow.
So it has 2059 up to 2059. I'm looking at the sheet right now.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And so I'm like, wow, like that would be awesome, right? Like, I mean, that's more than 10 years, I guess. But if we're still able to meet together and to share about how we're serving God and all, because we're all so spread out, like all of our peers everywhere, and we're all in different places. Some of us are leading churches, others of us are, you know, serving in various ministries within churches, right? And people are going through different life struggles, right? But to come together again and just to be able to be real, gain encouragement, and then, you know, just go out from there, I think would be great. And according to this doc, for our 60th year, when we turn 60, we're going to go to the moon, apparently.
Wow.
And when we turn 70, we're going to go to Mars.
my
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
that's the location.
What a vision. What
Yeah. So we have a vision to. No, and I think these are supposed to be like vision trips because like one of the ones, you know, is a certain country, a big country in Asia that starts with C. So like kind of to have vision. So I think Moon and Mars is maybe part of the vision, although I don't know who there is to
Wow.
reach out to.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode? Anything that you guys would want to say that you haven't had a chance to say before we wrap up?
I guess just a thank you to my peers. Yeah, they've been such a strength to me, meeting just like my practical needs, like from finances to emotional needs to everything. I think, yeah, they are my source of strength in a lot of ways. So thank you, my peers.
Yeah. And we should probably thank our peers more often than we do.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you, my peers too.
Thank you, my peers too.
Thank you,
2018.
peers.
So 2011, 2018, and 2019 get a shout out. No one else.
Yeah.
All right.
I have one more thing. Yeah, I guess one thing I'll leave off with is, yeah, if you really care about having these kinds of relationships, there's going to be a cost. Like, yeah, we have like finite time, finite schedule. And so like ultimately it becomes a prioritization thing. Like, yeah, like, do you think these relationships are that significant and that worth pouring into? And I think that they are. Like, you know, we've shared for the past hour or so and like how that's been a blessing to us. And yeah, I think it's worth the cost of figuring out ways to, yeah, make time for those trips or make time for those weekly gatherings or those meals. I think it's worth it in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. That's a good word. All right. That's it, I think. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another episode of dPod. I promise we're going to try to get these started up again. I know Elijah has been asking. Elijah from UIUC. Going to give you a shout out here. We'll get back on it, guys. All right. See you guys. Bye.